Right now, the average Australian aged 65 has just over $420,000 sitting in their super. And if you're anything like most people, you just did the quiet maths in your head. Am I ahead or am I behind? Hold on to that feeling, because that $400,000 figure is quietly lying to you. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why, and I'll show you the one number the headlines never print, the number that completely changes where you actually stand. We're going to walk through what the average Aussie really has in super at 35, 45, 55, and 65, the actual balances at every stage of your working life. Every figure here comes straight from the ATO and the peak superbody, ASFA. No guesswork, no vibes. But we are not stopping at the averages, because the average is exactly where most people get fooled. Stick with me, because the second half of this video is where it gets uncomfortable, in a genuinely useful way. Let's start at 35. At this age, the average Australian has around $86,000 tucked away. Now, 35 might feel late to be thinking about retirement, but here's the reality. Compulsory super has only been feeding your account for a bit, over a decade. The engine is running, it just hasn't picked up real speed yet. Picture a snowball sitting at the very top of a long hill. 86 grand doesn't look like much today, but it's about to start rolling, and that rolling is the whole game. Fast forward 10 years to 45, and the average balance jumps to around $171,000. That is almost exactly double, and you didn't have to double your effort to get there. That's compounding starting to bite. You're roughly halfway through your working life, and your money is finally pulling some of the weight for you. But 45 comes with a quiet warning. This is the age where the gap between the people who plan and the people who just drift starts to explode. Now, age 55. The average Aussie has around $282,000 in super, and for the first time, the finish line is actually in view. These are the sprint years. Your earnings are usually at their peak, the kids are often finally off the payroll, and this is your last real window to seriously pad the balance before you stop working. What you do in the decade between 55 and 65 can swing your entire retirement, and most people don't realize just how much. And then we reach 65. The average balance climbs to around $421,000. That's the big headline number, the one you'll see in every news article and every dinner party conversation. So let's put it all together. 86 grand at 35, 171 at 45, 282 at 55, and 421 at 65. Clean, simple, a nice rising staircase. There is just one problem with that staircase. The whole thing is built on an illusion. Because remember that one number I promised you, the one that changes everything? Here it is. It's called the median, and once you understand it, you will never look at an average the same way again. Let me show you why it matters, using the simplest example there is. Imagine 10 ordinary Aussies standing in a pub. 9 of them have pretty modest super, and then Gina Reinhardt walks in. Suddenly, the average super in that room is billions of dollars. But here's the thing. Nobody in that pub actually got any richer. That is precisely what a small number of enormous balances do to an average. They drag it upward and make everyone look wealthier than they really are. The median simply ignores the billionaire in the corner. The median is just the person standing dead in the middle. Half of Australians have more, half have less. It's the real, typical Aussie, and it is a far more honest mirror. So brace yourself. The median super balance at 65 is not $421,000. It's just $208,000. Read that again. Half of all Australians hitting retirement have less than 208 grand, barely half of the average that everyone keeps quoting at you. And this gap is not a one-off at 65. It holds at every single age. The median is around 65,000 at 35, 122,000 at 45, and 169,000 at 55. Zoom out to the entire country, and it's even more brutal. The average super balance across all Australians is about $173,000, but the median is just $60,000. So if the average has ever made you feel like you're falling behind, take a breath. You are being measured against a number a handful of very rich people quietly inflated. But here's the question that matters more than any balance. What does that money actually buy you once you stop working? Let's translate it. ASFA says a single person needs about $52,000 a year for a comfortable retirement, and noticeably less for a modest one. The median 5-year-olds 200 grand, drawn down over a retirement that could easily last 25 years or more, simply does not stretch to comfortable on its own. So where does the rest come from? This is exactly where the age pension quietly becomes the backbone of most Australians' retirement. For a huge share of retirees, super doesn't replace the pension, it tops it up. The people who retire genuinely comfortably are usually the ones who used super to lift themselves above pension-only living. And that reframes the whole thing. Your super balance isn't really a trophy to compare. It's the difference between just getting by and actually enjoying the years you worked your entire life for. Now, there's another split buried in this data, and it's a big one, because men and women are not retiring with the same super, not even close. At 55 to 59, the average man has around $320,000. The average woman, $243,000. That is a gap of nearly $80,000, and it lands right at the age where there is the least time left to close it. And by retirement, that gap is still wide open. Men sit around $449,000, women around $392,000. Before anyone assumes this is about choices, it isn't. It's structural. The gender pay gap means smaller contributions on every single payslip. Career breaks to raise kids mean months, sometimes years, with nothing going in, and far more women work part-time. Stack all of that across an entire working life, and this gap is the result. But if you want the clearest proof that the average hides almost everything, look at Australians aged 60 to 64, right on retirement's doorstep. The top 10% of men in that group have nearly $1 million in super, and yet 1 in 4 has less than $60,000. Same country, same age, sitting in the same waiting room for retirement, and two completely different futures. The average smooths all of that into one comfortable-sounding number that describes almost nobody. There is even a geography to your super. On average, the highest balances in the country sit in Canberra at over $220,000 per person. Compare that to Darwin, the lowest of the capital cities, at around $152,000. Same rules, same system, but where you live, what you earn, and the age of the people around you all quietly bend the numbers. Your postcode, it turns out, is part of your retirement story too. So let's make this personal for a second. Where do you actually land? Are you above the average or above the median? Because after everything we've just covered, you know those are two very different clubs to be in. Do me a favor, drop your age bracket in the comments, no exact dollar figures needed, and let's see where this channel really sits. I do read them, and it genuinely helps other people feel a little less alone in all of this. Alright, the number you've been waiting for. What do you actually need? ASFA puts the target for a single person at around $595,000 for a comfortable retirement. Now hold that next to the median 65-year-olds $208,000, and the real story snaps into focus. For a very large number of Australians, there is a serious gap left to close. In fact, only about 3 in 10 currently retire with enough to hit that comfortable standard. And here's the part that is genuinely not your fault, if you're older. Compulsory super only began in 1992, and it started at just 3% of your wage. For most of the last 3 decades, it sat at 9 or 9.5%. It only reached 12% in July 2025. So if you're in your 50s or 60s right now, you spent most of your career with far less flowing in than younger Australians will. The system simply wasn't mature enough yet. But that same fact is exactly why there is real reason for optimism, especially if you're younger. From July 2025, employers must now pay 12% of your wage into super, the highest it has ever been. and more money is flowing into accounts than at any point in history. ASFA estimates a 30-year-old today, with just $30,000 already saved, is on track to retire with over $600,000. Time and compounding do the heavy lifting. You just have to give them room to work. One honest note before you go, because it really matters. Every average in this video assumes fairly steady employment across your working life. Career breaks, years of part-time work, or being self-employed, where super isn't even compulsory, can pull your real number well below these figures. So if you're sitting there feeling behind, understand this. You are in very, very good company, and being behind the average is far more normal than the headlines will ever admit. So here's the one thing to walk away with. Stop measuring yourself against the average. It's a number a few very wealthy people quietly inflate. Measure against the median, know your target, and remember that every extra dollar you put in today compounds quietly for decades. If this actually helped you make sense of your super, subscribe, because we break down the real Aussie money numbers every single week. No hype and no fluff. And right now, tap the video on screen, because next we're breaking down exactly what these balances turn into as real monthly income once you add the age pension. I'll see you in there.